I know. And will that incessant beeping ever stop?
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
Your papers, please.
This is insane.
Good morning.
After he's stalked, we must get rid of him immediately.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road. The only station that matters.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Okay.
And here we go again. Another morning. I don't know. It was like some of you might have been wondering, will he be here today? I have to deselect some of these things, in order for my audio clips to play in order, they have to be checked. If they're not checked, they just, if I keep that, they play consecutively. Otherwise, I can do this and have an individual thing happen, right? You know what I'm talking about, Ducky.
Oh, no.
Yes. Okay. I'm here. The steeplechase face. That's what that is, if you didn't know that. And some of you might know that from Coney Island. Others, like me, could remember that from the Steeplechase Pier in Atlantic City. Atlantic City, New Jersey. The boardwalk on Atlantic City. That was a little bit further down from the Steel Pier. And that was my stomping ground for a long time. I mean, we lived down the shore for a while. My father had a business on the boardwalk in Atlantic City for a bit. And we always vacationed there like every summer, pretty much through childhood. Into high school. Like I told you, I was in an elevator with Grace Slick and Jorma and I guess somebody else from the Jefferson Airplane when there was a big Atlantic City concert at the Atlantic City Raceway, I think it was. And I actually got their autograph on a postcard, which I think I gave to a girl I was managing out in Hollywood, LA scene. I gave away a lot of stuff. I still have so much stuff, so much junk. Anyway, this is an actual caricature of the guy who I guess set up those places and others, as far as I know. I don't know the whole deep story. There's a book, I believe, you can find if you do some research on steeplechase. I think they've written about it. You might have heard that slurp that time. So the title of this show is Once Upon a Time, and I thought the steeplechase would just be like kind of something to start to bridge us or take us down that rabbit hole. Oh man, I got up early. I think it's my security, one of my fences. One of the alarms is like, the remote power needs to be updated or charged or something, or it's the wind, it might have blown it partially open, and it's doing this periodic, it's giving this periodic like beep beep beep, like warning thing. It's not overpowering that it's going to wake up the neighborhood, but the neighbor probably hears it. But it's like, I don't know, according to my Echo Dot, excuse me, trying to get my saw. I should have stayed in bed, but I guess, I don't know, maybe there was some pounding. It's 9 degrees outside. Fahrenheit. Okay? So definitely below 0 Celsius, way below 0 Celsius. And yeah, the weather's been like kind of just flip flopping crazy. It's supposed to get up to 45 today and then 55. And then Tuesday it's going to rain and be 57. But then by Thursday night, I mean, there's thunderstorms the whole week. I got to work upstairs today. In fact, I'm getting chest pains just thinking about it. I got to like chill about all this shit. But then, like Thursday night, after the thunderstorms and all that stuff passes, 3 days of hell, it's going to go down to freezing at night. Go figure. But it's 9 out there right now, so I'm not going out to try to figure out what the heck is beeping and how to fix it. First of all, it's 3:26 a.m. Eastern Time on the 20th of February. And yeah, it's one of those things. Are you afraid of that face? Is that scary? When I was a kid, I used to be like kind of afraid of that face. You know, when I was a really little kid walking by it or something, like kind of like semi-scary. It's just a type of dream face you would have a nightmare, like would appear in a nightmare. You know. But, you know, game over. You know? It's a classic. I mean, there's very few people that would remember that. You have to be of a certain age and just happen to, and timing, you know, to like have that been something that was ingrained in your mind, you know. I mean, it's different for New Yorkers, the Coney Island aspect of it. I mean, everybody goes to Coney Island at one point. But I mean, for people who don't, like, I'm not a native New Yorker. I lived in New York like, how many different times? I had two different jobs in New York. So yeah, there were 2 times I lived and worked in New York. Lived in Williamsburg one time when it was still rough. Like now I think it's gentrified. I haven't been to Williamsburg in 30 years or something like that. But I lived in Manhattan. You know, like I lived in the Upper West Side when I worked at Columbia University, and when I worked in, you know, in a publishing business, I worked entertainment publishing. I was in, I worked in Center City, but I literally had a penthouse apartment. It was a penthouse, upper floor. I didn't have the whole penthouse per se, but I was on the penthouse floor. So there were several units that were, you know, on that penthouse, the penthouse floor. And any of us could just walk a stairs up and be on the roof, which was standable, you know, and we had like a table and some chairs, so you could stand up there. I think I talked about it once before. You know, stand up there with a glass of wine or a beer and stare out down at the Twin Towers. Were still standing in those days. That's a long time ago. A really long time ago. But that's the type of life I lived. You know, and I was in the Twin Towers. I did business. It was one of our clients when I was in the business. I could remember having gone down there a couple of times, you know, to their offices. Yeah, things you do, you know, the places you go and the life you live. It's amazing. The stories you tell, and you can tell. I guess this game over hat needs to be slid just a little way over if I'm going to stay in this position. I mean, it's either that or I keep the steeplechase scary face up for you and have game over there. Of course, game over's up top there, too. I'm wearing the HBO Max, you know, Warner Brothers studio hat. I just canceled Netflix because it looked like my payment was coming due, and I don't know if they've got some kind of game they're going to play, but my payment I have it down as if I paid my payment. But it like the payment, I got a notification that like a payment was coming due on the 22nd or something like that. But maybe that was left over from something else. So I supposedly have it through March 14th. But, and I appreciate Warner Brothers. I mean, this hat is more of a promo of The Matrix Resurrections in theaters and on HBO Max than it is of HBO Max, which I canceled as well. It's like, the problem is it's not, well, I mean, it's money, so you could do something better with that money. I mean, HBO Max is like the high end one. I think that's about $16, with tax, over $16. Netflix, the lowest deal you get is like $8.99, but it's like $9.53 or something with, tax. I wish they'd just tell you it's $9.53 or round it out. It's like, because I used to do that when I had portions of my life where I did retail too. And what I would do is I would price an item just for the sake of my cashiers, or if I had to go up and deal with a transaction, usually I had somebody do it. But the idea is I would price my items so whatever the percentage of tax was, that it would even out, to an even number. And it would be my pricing was tax included. So if the item was $1.50 that we had already figured the pricing of the item based upon the percentage of state tax or whatever you had to pay. So I wouldn't you wouldn't get $9.53 from me. It would be $9.50. So you could give somebody 2 quarters back, right? Or the item would just cost $2 or whatever, $5, and so they could give you a $5, or if they gave you a 10, you gave them a $5 back. See what I mean? And it was just, and plus, that was a convenience for your workers and for yourself. But it also was like a no bull way of approaching it, saying, yeah, the item cost you $9.50. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to say it's $8.99 when it's $9.53. I mean, that's just a another goofy thing that you would never imagine would be held over into the 21st century, let alone the year 2022. Another reason why it's game over. Yeah. But yeah, I'm half asleep. I haven't heard that. Maybe that thing finally just stopped buzzing. Or maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it was somebody else. I won't know till the daytime. I have a switch, remote that I can turn it off, on, and do some other things with, security thing. And when it's daylight, I'll reactivate it and see if was me. Maybe it was the neighbor or somebody else. It just seemed to be coming from an area of one of my security measure areas, But whether that was the case or not, I won't know until it's daylight. I'm not going out there. 9 degrees and 3:30 in the morning. With a hoodie and a hat, like and an OJ type of hat, right? How they'll haul me away. Anyway, so this is basically going to be a flow of consciousness, like so many of my shows. Starting out a little bit mellower. I don't really feel a rant coming on, and I'm not in the mood for a rant. But I'm here. It's like yesterday. I didn't check, and let me check just to double check to see if let me go to YouTube while I'm on YouTube. And I don't see my show showing up, which is uncool, totally uncool. But I'm going to look at my videos. You can't see this, and I don't really want to show you this. It says live now. Okay, that's good. And apparently, the 42nd Street thing didn't get any sort of copyright thing. So we're cool. So I guess I could say, to complete this idea, is that the reason I'm here is
every kiss, every hug seems to act just like a drug. You're getting to be a habit with me. Let me stay in your arms. I'm addicted to your charms. You're getting to be a habit with me.
Yeah, so that's the reason I'm here. It's just a habit that will probably end soon. I watched a show back yesterday in its entirety, as I normally do. And even the rant I got on a little bit when I got on one of, ranting back at a chat, I realized it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was just a rant. It wasn't really, In fact, yesterday's show was a classic. I mean, I don't really like to get into those rants, and then then that like sets you off into a whole other thing, and then it's almost semi-political. But the days on this thing are numbered one way or the other, whether I voluntarily just stop. But I understand that within the coming weeks or week or pretty soon, that YouTube is in the process of releasing a new algorithm and a thing that's so-called based on what they call misinformation, but the idea is not misinformation per se, but that they're loosening the interpretation of it, so that if this algorithm is going to be structured in such a way that if it feels there's even, something that alludes to something that's like wrong speak, that will be, sifted through and gone through. So, in other words, they're setting these bots loose on all their content. And the way I see it is, it's just like people's videos are just going to be disappearing, and people will be getting, banned, or like I say, a lot of, people will just, videos will vanish and all that kind of stuff. And, you could end up with 3 strikes on one day or something like that, type of thing. Because, it's like, I got rid of the thing. I should have saved it, then I could have shown you. But if YouTubers are aware of it, if you're not, I'm telling you now. So it's as if, the way I read that, and I read this, whole thing that they're trying to do, is that it's not only that they're doubling down, which is crazy. It's like that, it's like what went on with Trudeau and stuff. That's why I don't mind talking about this stuff, because eventually, like I say, this is all going to come to an end anyway. But instead of talking logically and, just, I don't know, just be having things, like I say, this is once upon a time, this would never happen. Once upon a time, I would never be having this conversation with you. Right? That's the whole thing. Once upon a time, none of this stuff would be absurd. So, I showed you that steeplechase pier. And I have another video of Atlantic. This is of Atlantic City. No, I mean a video, but just a picture, a photo. And so this is the boardwalk in Atlantic City circa, I don't know, the late 60s, somewhere late 60s, early 70s. I mean, it's hard to tell, shorts. You got the women, women wearing those sleeveless things. That was kind of a late 60s fashion, right? And there's the steeplechase pier in the foreground. And then in the background is the steel pier. And that would be, I'm assuming that means Vic Damone was like the featured singer there. I saw Louis Armstrong on the steel pier. I had a family member who actually was performed on the steel pier. Tony Grant's Stars of Tomorrow. They had the diving horse. You can see on that picture, if you look closely under the word steel pier, not at the top, but like where it says General Motors exhibit. If you keep going down, it says steel pier again. Then it says diving horse. And they used to have this horse that used to dive into the water. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then they had this thing where you could get in. I don't know what that cost, but they had a thing called the diving bell. And you can get in this thing and it would take you under the ocean. Because out at the end of the pier, the water was, the pier was over the Atlantic Ocean. And there's Planters Peanuts on the left-hand side. You can just see the word peanuts. And you would have walked by there and you would have had that smell of roasted peanuts. Yeah, that was quite a time. I still have, some decent memories of that. Once upon a time. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So reminiscing and that's the image from the steeplechase pier. The guy. There was another pier too, and I can't exactly remember that. There was also this place called the Funcade. That wasn't on the boardwalk. It was just off the boardwalk. And it was a place that it was just filled with amusements. And you used to get like a black cherry soda in there. You'd put a nickel in this machine. And a cup would come down, paper cup. And then the soda portion would start coming down, and then the flavor portion. I mean, they were close together so that they stayed in your cup. And it was a nickel, and you get this cup of black cherry soda. At least that's the flavor I'd order. I still to this day like black cherry. Haven't had it in a while. I was getting it there for a little while somewhere. Somebody had it. Oh, I was able to order through ShopRite online, through some service, but I think that discontinued. And ShopRite used to have like a 79-cent 2-liter. This isn't long ago. This is a couple of years ago. 79-cent 2-liter bottle of black cherry. Diet black cherry, too, on top of it. Soda. But in there were all kinds of things, like, the the roll the ball and get it in those circles, all those things you'd see sometimes you might still have seen later on in life at amusement parks or events or, Maybe when the circus came to town, if it was some kind of big thing. But this was like a permanent thing. It was a funcade, and you walked to enter from the street level. You walked through like King Kong's under King Kong to get into it. You know, it was standing tall. You could see King Kong, and you walked under his legs, you know, to get into this place. That's old Atlantic City. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. But that's why I'm saying once upon a time and it's game over and, you know, these days are gone forever type of thing. Because, you know, see, the idea is, you know, people leisure vacation, you know, whatever. And unlike Disney World, which is like expensive as hell and stuff, in those days, you could get a cheap motel room. I mean, it was a motel room or a rental. And, you know, the stuff on the boardwalk, you know, wasn't like, you know, overly priced. It was more expensive maybe than in your hometown. But I mean, you weren't paying $7 for a soda. Like I say, the Steel Pier, you could get a soda for 5 cents. I'm sure on the piers things were a little bit higher. But I mean, a thing of saltwater taffy was, a box of it was like, I don't know. They were less than $1. You might get a couple for $1 or something. It was weird when you think about it. But, you know, people say, well, that's like, yeah, but if you adjust for inflation, it's... No. We're in hyperinflation times right now. That's part of the reason why it's game over. I mean, we're not getting out of this, you know. It's like, yeah, no one gets out alive, basically. It's messed up, you know. The beeping did stop. So maybe it wasn't mine, or maybe it's just, it beeps for so long until it's like its last breath, gasp, to let you know or something. I don't know. Who knows? I'll find out. I'm just glad it stopped. It was getting annoying to me too. Also, it's 9 degrees and any kind of batteries, even, you know, it's another thing to keep in mind, even with your own security systems, is that I have a lot of, this one particular one isn't solar based, but I have a lot of solar based motion detector lights, things like that, which work fine. And they seem to be good, you know, probably so much below 0 Fahrenheit, and it's not that cold. But if you do get, if this continues, you know, like I say, you know, this will probably be grounds for, you know, when they do this next thing. But, you know, the YouTube thing. But, you know, as people eventually do realize that the whole climate thing was, you know, was just another attempt, you know, was an attempt before the latest thing, and now the latest thing and the latest thing, you know, just various things they just kept shoving until they could get this reset thing happening, right? Which they were successful in doing. But, you know, as the climate gets colder and colder, you know, the complete opposite of what, you know, was predicted by these charlatans, you know, this is going to be a problem. And that's why I talk about the grid, because our grid is not even made to withstand, you know, cold weather. You know, and when you get, like, you look at this week as an example, and I don't watch the news, so I haven't been seeing what's going on and what happened on the coast of some of the New England towns and whatnot. And I don't even look that stuff up on the internet. But whether or not they were hit bad this year or not, I know there were predicted to be these gale force winds, hurricane force winds, and blizzard-like conditions, and this, that, the other. And there was icing in a lot of places. And when you get ice on power lines, like I say, or tree limbs that fall over power lines, because we have a system that reacts. It's not proactive, right? It's reactive. And it's been reactive this way for at least a good 30 plus years. And the problem with that is that then things get in disrepair. And what happens is you have you have that thing where too many things go wrong at the same time, and then the system is stressed, and it's impossible. And then it just snowballs out of control. And that's going to happen. I mean, that's like, it's like some people, they have thing called game theory or whatever. But I mean, there's, when you deal in logic, probability, and statistics, right? And you examine, you put all these parameters in, and you look at, just in studying the grid, seasons, geographic locations, demographic, populations, and, concentrations in areas, and this, that, the other, power usage, seasonal, all these factors. It just points to, you just have to, even if you just spend a short period of time contemplating this, it's inevitable that we are going to have a grid down situation at some point. And like I constantly say, and that's whether or not it's produced by some solar outburst, CME or worse, some kind of earth catastrophe or other, or natural disaster, or just a failure of the system because the system has not been maintained. It's like California, it's like we live in an era of scapegoating and the blame game. And they keep, like when they have forest fires, they blame them on climate change instead of their lack of forest management, right? And if you talk to anyone, I mean, literally anyone who really knows, like people who own forest land, because a lot of people do, they buy they buy like 100 acres of forest land. Some people have like 1,000 acres, more, right? Hectares. And, they'll talk to you about forest management and the importance of like clearing, and how that proper forest management leads, opens the canopy up, leads to new growth, and prevents, these the spreading of massive wildfires. Though lightning strikes and wildfires are part of forests, of the natural cycle of renewal of forest, particularly like I say, if you fly over this planet, one of the predominant things you see, apart from water, are forested areas. There's just such a massive amount of trees on this planet. But that's just an example of scapegoating right there, or blame game, because the idea is there are steps that can be taken. All right. Preventative measures are something that a reason to justify the existence of governments, right? It's just like it's supposed to be the Department of Defense. At one time, it was the Department of War. But I've argued that since the Bush administration, you could say even going back to Clinton, because he was lobbing a few, missiles, stirring the pot over there in the Middle East, right? But I mean, with the influence of the military-industrial complex, and I might as well play this because it's only a matter of a few seconds, not that long.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
I mean, you have these companies that basically their sole profit, business plan is based on selling weaponry, right? The manufacture and sales of war machines, equipment, material, ammunition, that type of thing. And then you have a whole Pentagon and a whole, bureaucracy built around that sits around, and creates scenarios and war games. I mean, that's their job. And so you put the two of them together and it's a recipe for war. So it shouldn't be called, the idea of it being the Department of Defense and that the government is, one of the reasons we pay taxes is to provide for the common defense, right? Well, think about like Ukraine right now. There's no common defense there of us. Remember, we're not paying taxes to protect Europe or NATO, you know what I mean? NATO or any of that stuff. That's not what our taxes are for. And that's not what the Constitution was, established for. It's the United States of America, right? You pay taxes for your country, and it's to provide for the common defense of the states, United States. People forget about that, right? And so you got Ukraine, which is a corrupt country, corrupt government, corrupt companies within it. I mean, it's like the heart of, when you think of corruption, Ukraine is like, in the top 10, most corrupt, what you would think of as corrupt nations in, there's 192 or 95, I don't know. But it's in the 190s countries in the world on this planet. And to say, and to say Ukraine is one of the top 10, most corrupt countries, I mean, based on many factors, it's based on their size, it's based on what, they can do and have done and continue to do, their resources, et cetera, and their the geopolitics of it all and all that. But in no way, shape, or form is messing around with Ukraine providing for our common defense. So what's going on now is the Department of War. And I just wish they would be honest and say, hey, we're going to change the name of the Defense Department to back to the Department of War, the way it was during like World War II. Right? And just admit it. Honesty. Stop playing games. Stop, the whole idea of mind games, messing with children, indoctrinating kids from when they're like when their minds are impressionable, they're thrown into day school, preschool, into kindergarten and all those formative, like where the brain is just still trying to, is like a sponge almost. Not almost, it is. And then once they literally alter the brain of children, and and then they're gone. I mean, then you would talk about like you'd have to like almost deprogram half the population, which isn't going to happen. That's why I say I it's a repetitive theme, but like I say, it's you're not going to save America, just like you're not going to build back better. And this idea of a great reset is ridiculous because it's been reset. You know? I mean, just look around. You know, this is like, these are all mind games. You know, words like Great Reset, Build Back Better, and Save America are mind games for adults. The Great Reset was when they implemented this system 30, 40 years ago and got us to this point now. Now you have certain people who are, you know, who have been like not exposed, you know, to the propaganda, the indoctrination, or the conditioning, who are now up in arms, you know, like, hey, well, this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, you know, you don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. It's game over. And for your own sanity, like I have up here, resist media and politics. Right? And when I mean resist it influencing you, not resist. We must resist. Right? Man, I'm still tired. I should have stayed in bed. It's just, at one point there was like this big bang like sound. Then there was this thing going off. I don't know. It's really weird. And it's cold. So I don't know if something fell in my attic. I mean, that was early before when I was first going to sleep last night. Or a bird hit the side of my window. But like in between my house, on the one side it's an open driveway, kind of drive through next to a doctor's office. But on the other side, I just have a neighbor. So it's just a walkway kind of between the houses. So there's really not enough of an area that it could have been a bird hitting a window. But I mean, it was something like a bam, you know. Enough for the cat was getting up looking. Oh, and I'm looking. I don't know what it is, and I don't see anything in the room that fell. Let's just go to sleep. But yeah, it's game over. You know, it's like we're at that point. So it's save yourself kind of, you know, what I say, and the people around you. It's the best you could do. I mean, you can spread the word, but you spread it in a, you know, as rationally as possible. It's like people don't understand, you know, when I say, you know, get this shirt, then what? Or buy my shirt. You don't know what you don't know. Or game over. Everything you know is wrong. Right? Or ROCKFLUX with the big lightning bolt going through the planet. You know, the logo. And then eventually, like I say, I'm going to start building out the ROCKFLUX site with some more information. But I have links to like my videos and stuff there, which tell the story. But I'll be putting some stuff, I guess, for people who want to read things. I could put copies of my essays and stuff, or links to my various. I do have some platforms where I was posting essays and things of that nature. But the idea is to be non-confrontative. And there's nothing that's, you know, nothing that like speaks loudly without getting into somebody's face is for you to have a hoodie or a t-shirt or a cap on that has a thought-provoking statement on it. I mean, you're at the checkout line in a store and you have a shirt on that says you don't know what you don't know, and someone glances at that. Or everything you know is wrong. You see what I mean? That's a way of like reaching to a person, that a stranger, you know, that's why I did that. Not like some profit making thing. I don't make any money. People aren't buying this stuff. It's like the videos. I'm not monetized. That thing behind me is an art piece, the YouTube thing. It says for having received uh, exceeded 3 views. Same with my books, I say this all the time. It's like, they're not bestsellers. They're there just because, you try to, if everybody would do something, some of us actually make the shirt, write the book, or do the video. Others watch the video, read the book, wear the shirt. That's the thing. I mean, that's how it's, that's how it works, right? It's like, it's no different than, anything else in life. Somebody's going to be the speaker, and there's going to be an audience. That's just how it goes. People choose the role they want to play in the game of life. And it is one big game, maybe on many levels. Even in a metaphysical way, I've talked about that sometimes too. Who knows? This whole thing could just be, a game that we chose to participate in. For some reason that we can't comprehend, because part of the rules of the game is that you have no memory of it while you're in the game until the game over, and then you're switched back on, so to speak, and you go, oh yeah, that was a trip, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's weird and it's crazy. And the older you get and the closer mortality starts to become a reality, the more you ponder, existence and things of that nature. And so it seems to me what a waste, that, when you look at these, there's no reason why, what has really changed from then till now? If you think about it. The only thing that's changed is the powers that be, the people that have seized power, have eliminated what you would see here, the working man, common man, average person, though some people there, could well be a millionaire walking down the boardwalk there as well. But that people just living in, peace and harmony and entertaining themselves and buying peanuts and popcorn and going to see a show or something without having to spend their entire earnings of a years of work or go into some kind of crazy credit card debt to do so. Right? So nothing's really changed. When people look back, they laugh. There are, a lot of young people do that. They laugh at when they hear people talk about the good old days or something like that, in a sense. Once upon a time. Oh, that's just a fairy tale. But the thing is, no, a lot of those fairy tales are based in fact. The more you get into the metaphysical, the more you realize that. Or there's a message in there. Like Alice in Wonderland. But I'm pouring coffee in my mug. Right to the rim. Yeah, it's a. I know this is one of those slow moving shows. It's early in the morning for me, and it's hard, and I'm not overly rambunctious and excited about anything. So it's just like, if you happen to have time to kill and you just want to hear somebody, you just want a relaxing conversation. I guess that's what today is, as opposed to yesterday, and many previous shows. But I'm trying to get a point across that's like that I struggle with, and I know that I struggle getting it across, and I don't personally struggle with it because I'm here, and that's why I'm endeavoring to get this out. But when I encounter people and talk to people, the resistance of understanding what, my motivation and why, and what I'm trying to say, and the resistance, like for someone to buy the book Codex or to wear a shirt that says, "You don't know what you don't know," right? Or even to watch a long form video and listen to these discussions that end up getting to a certain place. And the idea is that, as I was showing that boardwalk picture, that there's this assumption that certain things have changed, and those days, those days had to end, as if it was an inevitability. I'm sorry about this. On this show, we call this the legendary white handkerchief. And yes, it gets washed all the time. But it didn't have to be this way. Now, I don't want to be a fatalist in a sense and saying, well, but it is game over, so it's too late now. I mean, never say never is one way of putting it. But see, I don't like to mislead people and give people false hope. The idea is, sure, we could change things and turn things around. I mean, I know my whole life, I've talked about like what I've done in certain instances. I was like a turnaround guy. I'm somebody who is willing to put in, the time and try to pull off the impossible, to make something happen. And there are many people like me. There are people out there right now. And there are engineers, I guess, working on projects and stuff who have that same effort, who are up at this hour in this time zone already hard at it, work. And it's not their not their second shift. Who knows? They may have, they're just at it most of their waking hours. But the problem is, in many of those instances, they're working on, things that are not leading to improve the quality of life for the average person, or to solve any of these real life problems, societal problems, right? Their race, it's like the SpaceX race or something, or the technology race, people working, for the technocracy, trying to, improve the code for AI so we could have GPT-4. Or create these Tesla robots, self-driving cars. You know what I mean? And they have all these explanations. Oh, this is going to make life so easy and for people, and take away, menial tasks from people, and solve problems that we couldn't solve, computation wise. But the point is, ask anybody here if they're worrying about, having some robot, lift an Amazon package from their porch into their house, or a computational problem. I know this, this is, and this is a good picture, whoever took it. I just found this on the internet. I don't like, doing that normally. I usually purchase my photos or use my own. And I actually have Atlantic City photos, somewhere. In fact, I could even do a quick search. Let's see. Browse. Atlantic City. I just don't know how I would have saved this stuff. Apple, like I always say, Apple's search is so pathetic. Like the first thing that came up is like mail app, January. And there's like a picture of me in Atlantic City. Let's see. Atlantic City. No. See, they have this weird search thing that you would think when you would search for something like Atlantic City, the first thing that would come up would be anything to do with Atlantic City, like the first word. And then, but instead, the first things that come up are things like, well, nothing. Like, I don't know. So the answer is, I'm just going to cancel that. I can't find anything. I had some other pictures that were my own and from old home movies and things, but they're not shown. So those coders who are getting paid 6 and 7 figures or whatever at Apple, they've abandoned this machine, which isn't all that old. It's just one operating system behind. 16 gigs of DRAM, quad core processor, all that kind of shit. And why couldn't they just improve search? They don't care. They're a toy company. They just want to sell new computers and new, get you to get the new operating system because somehow that's tied into, better sales of movies through, they destroyed iTunes and split it up into what? Apple TV, Apple Music, and something else or whatever. So, that was the downfall and is the downfall. It's like I say, it's like the War Department, Department of Defense. It's like, when the military industrial complex took over and became a for-profit venture, the Pentagon is basically a for-profit venture. It's like the generals and the people working at the Pentagon are basically bureaucrats that are coordinating the flow of our tax dollars to these for-profit companies, companies creating war machines, right? And these think tanks and stuff that, create these scenarios that they can justify some sort of expenditures and transportation and purchase of the, like I say, materiel. All this weaponry and equipment and the development of all these things that get developed, partially developed. Some of these things never even get built, but they might put, $100 billion into the project. It's crazy. The Save America, Trump used to brag about how much money he was putting into the military. And I would be like, and there's a lot of military people out there. Like I said, I come from a military family, you know? And the idea is that it's not, that it's Department of Defense. I guess that says it all. It's about defense. It's not about, war. I mean, if that's your thing, you got a problem, kind of. I mean, when you're a kid, when I was a kid, we used to play Army, and all that stuff. We had these little Army men toys, and then we used to also go out, and I lived in an area where you had like woods and hills, and you'd play Army and all that kind of stuff. But the idea is that, when you grow up, the war games are over. And I'm the first one to say about people don't understand the socioeconomic geopolitics of the world and that it's not, a nice place. But the point was, even at this time, you still had, I'm sure there's a pickpocket or two in that crowd, and there was crime and, But the thing is, in general, like I said, I'm always generalizing on this show. Nothing is an absolute. But generally speaking, the 60s, particularly the late 70s, after the post-civil rights, post-feminist movement, post-Vietnam War, okay, the late, mid to late 70s, which is basically now what? Approximately 45 years ago, right? Give or take, right? It's at least 45, but like 45 years ago. And so you have these people who aren't even 45 years old, who have no clue of what this country is about, what life was like, and whatever. This picture here could be 55 years old, but it's at least 50 years old. And you say, well, why the question is, well, why can't we live like that today? Because the powers that be, the people that took over, this whole, media and politicians allowed, became marionettes to this, technocracy, corporatocracy, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, these globalists, right? And, we live in this, it's all hypocrisy for profit now. And they destroyed the quality of life for the majority of people. And so I don't blame these people who want to save America. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, we want to go back to this time and live like this. But it's never going to happen. It's game over as far as that's concerned on a national basis or even a global basis. But, you can find community, and that is what a lot of people, the smart people, are doing right now. The smart people are basically moving to places where they can live a life of somewhat security, fun, happiness, and find love and friendship and things like that in their life. Laughter. You don't see that when you look at protests. Like, that was the whole thing with this Canadian thing. It was like a love fest. I was watching this one guy who was doing live coverage from it. And it's like they were like handing out free food and people were smiling and laughing and happy. And for the kids, they had some kind of like one of those bouncy things you'd see at a fair and stuff. And it was basically the most, peaceful protest, gathering of people that you could imagine. And the totalitarian state came in with horses, and they literally and there's videos of this, they these giant horses that those Mounties and those type of people have. I mean, and they rode right over like old ladies and stuff. I mean, if you get like tramped on by a horse, you're like, that's internal bleeding, man. You're in trouble. People have injuries from horses. I know equestrians that they've had, suffered an injury from a horse when they were a child, and that's like haunted them their entire life into their adulthood. These people didn't deserve that. There were cops like dressed up in full riot gear with face masks and gas masks and all that kind of stuff, and these assault rifles and stuff. And these were a bunch of people eating like Polish sausages, cotton candy, and kids bouncing in a bouncy house type of thing. You see what I'm saying? So it's game over. That's Canada. Right? And it's, and then, and you look at the prime minister and he's this feminine guy who just, it's like, and so somehow people think, and it's like, no, see, they want to see like a Stalin, right? See, they're making like Putin out to be what Trudeau is doing. You see? You follow what I'm trying to get at? In other words, the real Russian, like what they call Russians here in the U.S., just occurred in Canada. But because Putin is like, some macho ex-KGB type of guy, and Trudeau is this like effeminate, boyish, guy, people but he's the one who's put the iron fist down and is like, hauling away children, elderly people, and trampling and beating. And there were people with bloodied faces from being kicked in the face by horses. And you see what I'm saying? So it's all, it's this projection of like an image, and people and the media, because even the Canadian media, it's the same as the U.S. media, because the U.S. media is like doing the same thing. You have to watch YouTube to have seen the people on the streets, streaming live for like 2 hours straight, unedited, to see what it was really like. But the news media would put together, a 60-second or 2-minute clip. And, with me, it's funny they don't have like the cry of the Valkyrie, some, weird, scary music, and put together some montage of something to try to create some kind of weird false idea of what was going on. That's why I do long form videos, because even when I get on a rant, then the rant ends and then I continue the story and we talk and we work it out and we get through it, and it's like, it makes sense. But see, people don't want that. They want to see a clip, they want a 17-minute, 20-minute. A lot of people want a 3-minute, 2-minute. Nobody wants anything over a half hour, that's for sure. But the truth doesn't come in a half hour in most instances. Understanding and deconstructing something sometimes takes an hour or two. Most times, really. I've seen some people have 3-hour videos where they were trying to deconstruct something like this that's very complex. But no one has time for that because they don't want to know. And then the moment you hit on a word like I call him effeminate or something like that, then that's a trigger word for somebody thinking, oh, and then turn it off immediately, block video. It's like, well, he is. Right? So he should be proud of that, the way I understand it. If I'm to take what I hear, he should be proud of his, that's what he is. He's some kind of thing that wouldn't be considered a he, right? These people who are into pronouns, right? You couldn't call Justin Trudeau that, so he must, because you could see him. Of course, the same guy's got who was in a picture wearing blackface and a hood or something too, or whatever. So the guy's a hypocrite. But that's the kind of stuff that will be taken down off of YouTube eventually, if not today. And that's why too bad I get up so early and do these things. And even if I was doing this in the middle of the day, I wouldn't have an audience. And I can't, it's like to each their own, but I got to have a life. So I'm trying to do my thing. The video's here for anyone to see. I've tried to have fun doing these things, make them fun with the sound effects and, and creating all kinds of graphics and, the average person, their graphics suck. I got to admit it. Especially the posers. Boy, does that get me going. The YouTube millionaires, the posers. We didn't expect this to happen. Right? Literally, you see a video like that. And then you watch the thing and it's like it was some minor thing. Like, oh, yeah, we didn't expect to drop the box of nails on the floor. And they're like getting 100,000 views, making like, $100,000 a year or something for the channel. Having a real plaque, right? Yeah, I know. It's weird. And that's why it's game over too. Because people want to believe, what they want to believe. They want to hear what they want to hear. They want to see what they want to see. They just don't want to deal with reality. And that's sad. And that's how we got to this point. And I don't see how you can get out of this other than saving yourself. Doing something. Finding, community, companionship, something to occupy your time with other than getting caught up in politics and, media and politics, like I say. Resist the media politics. That's the thing. Because that's going to bring you down the most, this chair. Yeah. Focus on health and things of that nature. Today, I don't know. I've got to go. Someone might be coming down. And I have to go to a hardware store and waste money on overpriced, like, spray sealant. Because we've got 3 days of rain coming up, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe beyond. And I'll tell you, I'm mystified as to where that water's getting in. I just don't know. You know? And I just keep spending money and keep adding layers and layers, and it just keeps coming in and coming in and coming in. And this stuff is so expensive. Yeah. Another reason to cancel HBO and Netflix, I guess. Canceling them. I just hope I already paid Netflix. That's all. You know? That's all I hope. I'm thinking of canceling. I guess I should I'll cancel Apple TV too. I was watching this show Servant for a while, but it's depressing. So I should cancel that. I'm just going to cancel, more things, I guess. Sorry about that. Glare over there. Because I've got to pay to, for these various not solvents but sealants to solve this problem, to get me through to the spring, because it's just going to get more and more. This is the rainy season is ahead. Spring it rains. Right. And if we have, it seems we're back into the classic cycle. So if April showers will bring May flowers, and it's only end of February, I could be looking at some serious, like week-long rains, all day rains. So I've got to spend the money on that, And it's funny, it's just like with inflation I say we have runaway inflation where the price of things has doubled. Like, for example, in my garden, the type of bags that I would put to top off my raised beds in my garden, the price has doubled. So that's 100% inflation, right? And people saw that with lumber. And while lumber prices in many areas have come down from their highs, they still are still high. It's the same with the price of fuel. It's still up. They're like, because, the price of crude, I think, is something like $90 a barrel. So the actual eventually, see, the way I see this, if anybody's interested in the way this is going to come out, is you have to remember this is a midterm election year and everything's about politics. Okay. And the corporatocracy, remember, the media and politicians get their money from the corporations, right? And so do the media, right? Campaign donors and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a push by the corporations to keep the status quo, so they don't want some change or shakeup. Right? Like Wall Street doesn't like uncertainty. They like things the way they are because they adapt. They don't care. They get free money. The Fed's giving out free money to to its member banks, So they've got a system that's working. And so what they're going to do is prop things up pretty much through the elections, which don't happen till November. And then you're into like Thanksgiving, the end of the year. So it's this time next year. You have about a year to get your act together. I mean, this year will be a struggle because inflation has already hit. But what I'm saying is that next year is when the fit hits the shan. Right? Because, they're not going to worry about 2024 will be 2 years away. It just doesn't, that's the, in other words, they're just going to have to release the pressure valve next January or. And then that's, and so the idea, and I would hope, not that it would matter, but I would hope that people would realize that politicians aren't the answer and that the media is not the answer. But they don't seem to. And that's why I think it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Like I say, no matter who's been in office, it doesn't matter what party's been in office. It doesn't matter, like, who the news readers are or who whatever. The quality of life for the average person, has just like drop. These days are gone forever. You see, if you look straight over on the steel pier, you see admission free, So you're never going to get back to, sanity. The best you could do is try to get to a position where you can live as free as possible and have community. I mean, I know myself. See, I don't have community. And that's the biggest loss I have. But the trade-off is that I'm free, relatively free here, and my cost of living is manageable, totally manageable. It's not the greatest, but it has to be the way it is because if, otherwise I would be caught in a trap. See, the people who are going to be hurt the most are the people who, the few people, the working class, middle class, upper middle class, that whole zone of people. See, the poor, those living at the poverty level, around that level, and the elites will get through this thing more or less. But it's everyone in between, which is the most people in this country, are the ones who are really getting, totally hit hard and will continue to get hit hard. And their lives have become really difficult. Like I say, they're probably going to do reassessment next year because real estate prices have gone up. So they're going to reassess houses, and then people's taxes are going to go up. And I know many people. I know people who still live in these houses that are like, they're pretty big, and they're already paying pretty big high taxes. Well, I mean, interest rates could go up and taxes go up. Man, you're screwed, right? But then you move into a neighborhood like I did and you sacrifice community because you're more or less like kind of, there's no real community here. You're kind of boxed in. It's quiet out there because it's a Sunday morning. We haven't really seen the trucks. Coal trucks. Though it's 9 degrees, I'm surprised they haven't pulled people out, on overtime, unless they're in some kind of solidarity with the the Canadians or something. But usually that doesn't happen until 5:30 anyway. But the show probably by the time the show ends, trucks will probably start. Because they're going to have to, because the demand for electricity, it's moved up to, well, just north of here it's still 9, but here it's 10 degrees. 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's nuts. And it's been like that, pretty much. January was freezing and February was freezing. So yeah, so that's what I miss the most, is that sense of community. And they don't have, in those old days, and I used to be a member of these things, like, as I was older, towards the end, as these things were falling apart, because they were usually old guys there but I was interested, but there weren't a lot of young people who cared, and so the places just closed. But they used to have all these various social clubs everywhere. They still exist in some places, but they used to be everywhere, right? So like a town like this, even an area like this, there should have been like a half dozen social clubs. So you could join you could go hang out at the VFW, Sons of Italy, Knights of Columbus, AmVets, American Legion, all these kinds of places. They had all kinds of places, and so you could just go. And it was a sense of community. And they'd have events, and some of them would be like stupid events or whatever. But it was a place to go and hang out. And in many cases, there were bars inside there and stuff like that. But you didn't have to go. You could go and just sit and have a beer, or you can have there used to be old timers in there just drinking a ginger ale or something, or messing with a pinball machine or something. But, there were social events and get-togethers and things like that. So it was an excuse. And so you'd meet people and, you'd have a sense of community. And it's the same with, like, a lot of people have that with their churches and different groups like that and stuff. But all those things, have become few and far between, and particularly in areas where it's cheaper to live. So the benefit of my place is that it's very cheap to live. I can grow a garden. That looks kind of nice, right? And my mortgage, tax, insurance are $200. So my cost of living is affordable, way affordable by most standards. I have like space, outdoor space and garden and, that kind of thing, that garage, a little workshop, hangout area and stuff. But other than that, it's like game over, unfortunately. There's no sense of community here. And I moved here, so I don't know these people. I know a couple of people, so I don't know, those. I don't have family here, right? So I didn't grow up here, didn't go to school here, so I don't know people. I know a couple people that I occasionally talk to, type of thing. And that's the downfall of, because what happened is when you destroyed, see, it's not even the idea of, I'm not really a total overly people person at this point in my life anyway. Okay. So it's not like but the idea of, just having a place to go, at one point, like I said, when I moved here, there were enough businesses that I actually put out this little mini publication that had a list of all these businesses. But like a dozen of them have vanished within just the past 5 or 6 years that were along this strip, the street. They just went out of business. Like almost a dozen. And so that would be stuff to do. That's community. And you would get to know the person because you're local. Like I said, there used to be a thrift store. So I would probably be a place I would stop in once a week, right? So I would get to know the person who worked there at the counter, small talk, chit chat, maybe run into a neighbor inside there, right? Well, that place is gone. It's been gone for a couple of years now, right? I forgot to mention the other day when I did mention this in my litany of places that went out of business, there was also another store, like an independent convenience store about halfway down the street, and the guy had, I used to smoke cigars. I haven't smoked one in a while, but he used to sell things like cigars. So I've gone in there and bought cigars a couple times, but he had the lottery ticket machines in there, so you didn't have to like even buy them over the counter. You could just put like $1 through the slot and get like a rub off ticket and stuff like that, and some of the basic things, convenience store stuff. But there were places like that. There was another guy up the street that had this deli, and he also made like, I don't think it was his wife might have made this stuff, but they made these ethnic type foods and stuff, and they would put some in the refrigerator or the day they would make them, because I used to go in there almost every day. And his prices were really super reasonable. And so I would buy like some cold cuts and whatever he would make, He closed. Now there's like some convenience store that's like tied into, it's like a Sunoco or whatever, tied into a 7-Eleven type of store. But I mean, expensive stuff is in those places. You can't shop there. And it's in, out, anyway, it's not like, it's the different, I used to know the guy, talk to the guy, and he needed something. He wanted a signed thing. I made something for him, stuff like that. I used to go and stand and talk to him for 20 minutes. That's like small town type of stuff. And that's gone. So, to see that happen in such a short period of time here, this can't be unique. And you saw those towns where they had riots and stuff, and where they destroyed those storefronts. Those people aren't going to rebuild and reopen. So all people in those neighborhoods, it's even worse because they live on top of, it's not just that the businesses closed, those were like forced to close, so people lived in fear, also live in fear. So I think it's something that's happening all over. It's this idea, and that's why, people, this Instacart, people are ordering their groceries delivered to their house, or buying from Amazon, Walmart, that kind of thing. I don't know. Well, one of the guys I do know in town was telling me about a lot of rough people apparently have moved into the area. They're bringing these people in from the inner cities because, And you have to ask, why would someone want to come here from some inner city? You see what I mean? Because the light, So they try to convert it into that lifestyle, which is basically, and, it sounds stereotypical, but it's true, into some kind of drug party culture, right? Because they don't have the club scene, they don't have the scene of the city, so all they have is to party. And, and then that ultimately leads to gangs, people controlling the drug trade, and all that kind of stuff. It's like they've legalized marijuana, medicinal marijuana, but that's not the thing. The drug trade is still, hard drugs. And those are the ones that are the problems. And so, and the gangs are behind. So it's pretty, so community, you just don't have that sense of community anymore. So it's an interesting time to live, which is not a positive thing. Like I say, that's a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. That's what it comes from. It's an old Chinese saying. It's like a curse if someone says that to you. And these are interesting times. And I believe it's the end times, and not so much, like I say, I'm not the guy in the corner with the sign, the end of the world is near. It's just for multiple reasons. It's like I started this whole speech, right? That's what it is. Where I was trying to explain from looking at this logically, probability and statistics, from a realistic, standpoint when you're dealing with infrastructure, and this idea of having a society that is like not proactive but is reactive, and just allowing civilization, Western civilization, to just collapse all around it. And that's a horrible thing, because when that happens, you're you're doomed to fail. Because you're never going to, not in a country of this size and with a population of 330 million people. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So it's just, we're at that point where, we blew it as a people. And it's not so much we, you and me. We didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I didn't. But we allowed these people, we ignored them, let them get away with all these kinds of things without, in other words, people would rather watch somebody, in other words, people were supporting the news and making these people wealthy, who in turn were supporting these excuse me, I'm sorry for that. What I usually do on this show, I mean, is
really funny. Really funny.
I know, it's really not. I'm just trying to survive. Stay alive. But what people did was they watched the nightly news, which in turn enriched the media. The media became the news readers and the media companies became wealthy. They became bought out by the corporations. They kept those people who promoted the corporations in the media. And so the media became the PR agencies for the corporations, the corporatocracy, as I call it, because that's what the government is. And so in effect, they controlled the way they controlled thought, right? You know, you don't need mind control, some woo-woo, you are getting sleepy, you know, some kind of hypnotic thing, right? Or subliminal stuff on TV. You know, you don't need to control minds that way. You control minds through the education system and through television and through entertainment. You know, by a constant bombardment of the same ideology that's interwoven or is subtext within the stories, within the newscasts, and is presented by the teachers. And you hire attractive people to be on TV and in movies, and people tend to think beautiful people, you know, they want to believe them. You see? It's the cult of personality. And that's how this whole happened. And at this point, the majority of people, and I hate to say that, but it's true, you just have to look at it. The majority of people are already like over to the so-called dark side. And you can't change that. You know, you can't persuade somebody, you know. You ever try, you know, somebody who's like hell-bent on something? Like I say, it's like arguing with a 2-year-old. You simply just don't do it. You know, a 2-year-old child, you can't, you know, is, you know, if they're on some kind of thing and obsessed with something, you just have to like let them work it out. And a lot of people today, they're 35 years old and they're acting like 2-year-olds. And it's the same deal. You can't reason with them. It's like, you know, they're too far gone. I call it a Peter Pan society that we have. It's people walking around, you know, they might as well be carrying rattles with them. I mean, it's pathetic. So that's game over, and that's the end of a civilization. It's the fall of Western civilization. And it just so happens to be timed with a potential Earth cataclysm. But even if that Earth cataclysm is not in the cards, which I think it is personally, but say it's not, this idea of this reactive society instead of a proactive society means ultimately there's going to be some kind of grid down situation, and our society is entirely dependent upon electricity. You know? Energy. See, people talk about electric cars, but they forget that they run on coal and natural gas, really, because that's where the electricity comes from. And it's all passed on through a grid, you know? And it's just wires, and the wires are susceptible. You know, they always talk about we need to get security from having hackers hack this, hack that. I wouldn't worry so much about the computer hackers. The hackers aren't going to be able to hack anything. Just like Bitcoin's not going to be worth anything if there's no electricity. Right? That's the part people don't see. You know, I watched this woman, I forget her name, Anastasia something or other. I think that's her name. She's like an engineer who specializes in, like, you know, she does these reviews of chips and that kind of high-end stuff. And, you know, and I've been much interested in, you know, how revolutionary this Apple like M1 Pro and their latest chips are. They're really powerful chips, and this whole dynamic, this idea of this RISC, RISC chip. I mean, if you're not into computers, you might not, this stuff, doesn't make any sense. But I mean, in layman's terms, it's the idea of creating something that is very efficient and uses the least amount of power. Okay? So it can do, it has way more processing power, but uses way less wattage, right? Like ridiculous amounts less. And so if I had money, this chair is so uncomfortable. If I had money to waste or to spend, actually, on other things other than just the cost of living, as that's the problem with runaway inflation, the cost of living goes way up. And I didn't have problems that I have to deal with, like wasting my money on sealants today instead of food. The people talk about that, these older people, they buy, it's a choice between their prescription drugs or food or something like that. Yeah, I understand that now. It's like a choice between trying to seal this, which probably won't work, but I got to try. Do nothing is not an option. But anyway, back to these chips. If I had the money, if I had a couple of grand, and you really need it, several grand, it's like, I'm sure this spring Apple's going to announce their newer chips in their computers. And so what that means is that those computers will even run, like right now, we have a lot of what we call Energy Star. Most of our appliances, computers, and things like that are what's called Energy Star. That's why the people who are into this, why we never really needed to be a part of this, like Paris talks and stuff like that. Like, because no one ever came out, because the problem was the people who were criticizing this stuff didn't understand enough about energy to argue with these people, because there were sound arguments against it. There were arguments based on, simple arguments like, hey, if things are warming up so much, how do you explain the 1930s and the Dust Bowl? Like, I listen to NOAA radio and I hear that I hear highs, they'll give at the end of the thing, because I'm listening because of my roof leak, I want to hear weather forecast. And usually once they get through all that, then they'll talk about records. And they'll say, well, the record high was of this time was, 62 degrees in 1933 or in 1884. But, these other people would have you believe that as if like, and meanwhile it's like 10 degrees outside. And it's been consistently cold this entire winter. And the past couple of years, like I said, it snowed. I've been gardening for the past 5 years in my backyard, and we've had snow into May and frost late April into the first week of May, every one of those years, I believe. May. The first day of spring is in March. April showers bring May flowers, man, not May snow and frost. And these people are still hell-bent on it, and they're saying, oh, it's like, and they have these conferences. They just had one in Scotland last year or whatever. And it's like, what are you guys doing? So the arguments were there all along. But no one realized it. And it's the same with the Energy Star and like what we've done with regulations on cars, in other words, on emissions and stuff. So what I'm getting at is that most of the appliances that we use in the U.S., see, the stuff that they're using in other parts of the world is probably like, sucking up energy and is causing all kinds of problems. But the things we use here predominantly in the US basically use hardly any electricity, and our vehicles are very low on emissions. And even our plants, due to regulations, have all sorts of filtrations and HVAC systems and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we're a very energy efficient country as a, in general, more so than most. So we use the fossil fuels that we do use are out of necessity to produce the amount of thermal units necessary to deal with a 10-degree weather outside. Right? It's 5:11 a.m. It's dark. Okay? It's winter. It's 10 degrees outside. As far as I know, there's no wind. All right? It's one of those no wind days. There's no sun coming into solar panels. And in the wintertime, you have very little solar, days. You have days when it's cloudy. This weekend, it's going to be thunderstorms and rain like at least 3 days in a row. I didn't look extended, beyond that. So that would be 3 days in a row without sun. So the batteries would pretty much be at that point taken down if you had a solar powered system. And the temperature is going to dip down to freezing, when it's all said and done, after those 3 days of no sun. And so how are you going to heat homes where you have for hundreds of millions, for 100 million some people? I don't know how many people live in the northern tier of the United States, but we know those are the big cities like Chicago, right? Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, D.C., they get cold weather. Boston, all the way across to the Pacific Northwest, the Midwestern cities. You know what I mean? You're talking, a lot of people. And these people have to deal with extremely cold weather, and you've got to heat their homes and their businesses or buildings and run their factories and stuff. So the arguments along the way were really easy. All people had to do was explain, saying, hey, if you really look at the record books, you'll see that it was way hotter before. They based the numbers post 57 or the 1950s. They just figures lie and liars figure. So they didn't go back to when it was hotter. Number one. Number two, they left out the idea of Energy Star and energy efficiency. They left out the idea of emissions controls and all that sort of thing, that we have cleaner air and we've put in all these things. They left out the idea that the places where they were taking these heat temperature readings from were usually airports or cities, which were always a degree Celsius or 2 hotter in general because they generate their own heat. Think of an airport. You've got a tarmac that's black. So even in the wintertime, that black tarmac is generating heat. And you've got constant jet engines coming down, and taking off. And so to put weather stations at airports you're guaranteed it's going to be a warmer spot. No one ever mentioned that, but as far as I know, except me. And they do the same with the city. They would have these weather stations and and you'd even see announcers and they'd be on the roofs of these buildings, right? Giving the report as if they're outside. So they're showing the weather. But they're neglecting to tell that there's all these HVAC systems and it's a concrete jungle of asphalt, cars, buildings, and HVAC systems, and all this concentration of people and buildings that's basically generating more heat in that area. But that the planet that they talked about, save the planet, has basically been getting cooler. I even find people who are who understand that the whole thing was basically the UN IPCC's fudge things, that they still don't understand that aspect of it. And they they don't realize that, which is why no one ever talked about it. But, in a cooling planet, what are we going to do? And what happens if the grid goes down? So in a cold planet, tree limbs get iced over. They fall over a power line. If it happens in some key areas, you end up with the grid down situation. If it this is most likely to happen in the winter. People are going to freeze to death, be without electricity and all this stuff. No access to their banking, their Bitcoin, their computers, their internet. So what I was trying to say is, so you get a company like Apple that's developing its new chip, its high efficiency, that really what you really want to do is have the most efficient, if you want to continue some kind of lifestyle. I mean, if the grid goes down, the internet pretty much goes down, more or less. I mean, I don't know. Even cell towers, there's a certain amount, but I mean, what I'm saying is that what you want to do is the average person should probably have 1 or 2 solar panels and should have some low wattage, energy efficient, laptop or some kind of device or tablet, and something like, I have one over, I think I've already showed it on the show. Like if you're into music and stuff like that, let me get one. If I could, I'm tethered. Here it is. Something like this. It's like an amplifier that you could hook speakers up, right? And outside of like a smartphone or a tablet, you can plug into this, plug in some speakers, very low wattage. Basically, it says power input, but it doesn't tell you, but it can't be much. I forget some of them, they might be 12 watts. In some instances, there might even be 5 watts, some of these things. I have one in my kitchen. It puts out a punch of power. And so if you want to maintain some kind of thing, you really should think about that. And then at least you can have somewhat, because this is such a technological society that we live in. So anyway, I guess I'll end it there, just with that. It's kind of a cold ending. But I mean, you get the idea that survival's not enough. You want to survive and thrive. And you want to try to be aware of what's going on. And I have on here like this great solar stuff. If you go to that website, I have a couple of things there that, would steer you in the right direction. And my last 2 books, Then What and Codex, out of my 10 books, those are my 2 recent ones. If you want to learn more about me and some of these ideas, these ramblings that I go on, you get them in print form and have them. Because, like I say, I'm telling you, man, I'm the guy, telling you this digital thing it's here today, gone tomorrow. And why not get a hoodie or a shirt, game over, or you don't know what you don't know and stuff like that. If they kick me off this channel, I'm on Rumble. But you can always go to rockflux.com because I've got links to all the things I do there. and you can listen to my beat poetry. You may not necessarily like the tunes and may not be mastered the best, but, I've got over 50 songs. And you can find them on YouTube, but they're also on Apple Music and, Spotify and stuff like that. You just got to hunt around. Some of my crappier earlier stuff, I admit it. Not all my stuff is good. I experimented with some things. It took me a while to get it together. But somehow on Spotify, they have the older stuff, like some of when I was just starting out. Just skip over that and look at some of the later stuff. You might like it. Anyway, like I say, I don't know. Here today, gone tomorrow. I don't know if I'll be here, but if I am, I'll talk to you. If not, take care.